Well, I don't have a problem with that, but I'll never forget
My social media.
the other guys in my office.
No.
No, a political.
Doesn't look like a.
There she is.
Then she looks enough like her.
It's leather. His cousin.
Probably the owner of the house is my, yeah, no, it does. There's a,
Yeah, we can make that Apple TV show.
What is
Oh,
this?
oh, I mean, what's the code
Is this a gift?
for?
Is this a gift for
I'm just gonna-
paperweight?
I don't know.
Oh, okay, yeah. that's what I hear.
John Fisher.
Hey, if I-
Yeah,
just
capital,
so you know the
no,
code,
I
have
did
your
capital
attention,
W.
please.
Yeah.
Okay,
And capital K. Gosh.
Oh, no, no, I was instant.
If I can have your attention, we're gonna begin the meeting at 11 o'clock, and we do have a quorum. We'll ask the executive director to confirm, the quorum and the public notice was not given.
Public notice was given and we do have a quorum.
Yeah. So before we go to public participation, the first thing I would like to do is have John Fisher back there to welcome us.
Want me up there, Mr. Chair?
This home place. So as long as wherever the camera can pick you up, so you're able to hear.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Usually right now. We get you.
All right. Okay, my name is John C.K. Fisher. I am the junior member of the Outreach and Education Committee at the Kentucky Human Rights Commission. I'd like to welcome everyone here. The Kentucky Human Rights Commission North Kentucky office has been open for about 30 years, and I've been here for about 21. I was hired by Madam Executive Director, the great Cynthia B. Fox, when she was the supervisor of outreach and education. And what I like to say, every day I go to work, I have 3 guiding principles that Madam Executive Director taught me. Number 1, we are government workers. We serve the people. Don't get too busy for your job to forget that who's in charge is the people of Kentucky. They're the ones who pay our salary. They're the ones who work for it. Number 2, Madam Executive Director insists that we return every call and every message. She says we don't know if we can help them if we don't return their call or message. Number 3, If we can't help them, then we find someone else who can. So she has always encouraged us to have alliances with other agencies and other nonprofits so that we can direct the people to the appropriate source if their problem or issue does not fit in with the Kentucky Human Rights Commission. What I would say too about this office is that during the past 20 years, we have had two very significant accomplishments. Number one, we helped the city of Covington draft its fairness ordinance back in 2003. At the time, yes, Mr. Harvey. 20 years. At the time, Covington was only the third city behind Louisville and Lexington to have a fairness ordinance. And this was not a very easy thing to pass because we live in the shadow of Cincinnati, which at that time was a very conservative city. And I am told that the Covington Human Rights Ordinance is actually the best out of the 25 or 30 that exists within the state for the depth and the breadth that it covers. The second major accomplishment I would say that the Kentucky Human Rights Commission office has had was that we helped the city of Covington add Dr. Martin Luther King's name to 12th Street here in Northern Kentucky. That was actually a 17-year fight led by the Northern Kentucky NAACP and a lot of city and community and religious and business leaders. After we got that Dr. King's name on the main thoroughfare, which is 12th Street, my concern then was getting Dr. King's name added to the freeway, I-75. My thought was, if this southern city, which once was the home of slaves, can show that you can add Dr. King's name to 12th Street, that would show everybody coming up from Florida, everybody driving down from Canada, because this is an international highway, how you can make progress. So I spoke to, at the time, State Representative Arnold Simpson, who was the first and only Black state representative from North Kentucky. How do we get Dr. King's name on the interstate? He said, call the Northern Kentucky Transportation Office, ask them what to do. I called that office, I said, what do we need to get Dr. King's name on the interstate? He said, number one, get me a letter from your executive director from the Kentucky Human Rights Commission. Number two, get me a letter from the Covington City Commission. With those two things, we can get this done. So I drafted a letter and it was signed by our executive director at the time, John J. Johnson, and Mr. Frank Warnock, who was the city attorney at the time, who also drafted the fairness ordinance, got the Covington City Commission to sign off on this. And what I'm proud to say, it took 17 years to get Dr. King's name on the street. It took less than 2 years to get his name on the highway. So when you drive home today and you drive past 12th Street and you see Dr. Martin Luther King's name Boulevard, you will know that this agency was a driving force behind that. And we also have some guest speakers today. The Honorable Mike Steinman from the Covington Human Rights Commission would like to address this board, Mr. Chair, when it's appropriate. And then we have the Honorable Chris Hartman from the Kentucky Fairness who would also like to speak to you when it's appropriate. So I thank you, I welcome you. Thank you much, Mr. Chair.
You left out one important fact in terms of what you disclosed. And that is that the state representative who was responsible for getting that done is the KSU credit.
Oh, okay, there you go. That's Arnold Simpson. And by the way, his wife was a longtime worker. She ran the payroll department here for the city of Covington. All right. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
So thank you for that.
Did I also mention Ron Washington was here from the city of Covington?
No.
He's the vice mayor and he would also like to address you.
We got it on the agenda. I guess they are formally on the agenda. We would do it. Have we had any requests for public participation?
We have not.
So the first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the October 19th, 2023 meeting. I have a motion to approve the minutes. So moved. Second. It's been moved and seconded. Those minutes be approved. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion carries and those minutes are approved. Now we move to, an agenda item that Cynthia, you're gonna introduce, the next two items, the covenant official, the covenant human rights official, as well as our guest speaker.
Actually, I didn't receive anything. Chris Hartman, John was going to introduce the Covington officials. If, I would like to have John come up and do that to begin
Okay.
with, and then we'll have Chris Hartman.
So one other quick thing, Mr. Chair, Madam Executive Director, I have a letter here from Sister Janet Bucher, who is the administrator of the Church of Our Savior here in Covington. This church has served the Black community for more than 75 years. And Sister Janet is a member of the Kentucky Civil Rights Hall of Fame. For the past 25 or 30 years, she holds an annual breakfast on the Saturday before Martin Luther King Day to bring together, it's an ecumenical service to bring together all members of Northern Kentucky to discuss and celebrate Dr. King's legacy and how do we move forward. She has sent a letter to the Kentucky Human Rights Commission, and what she would like is our support in getting the Church of Our Savior designated on the National Register of Historic Places. So with your permission, Mr. Chair, I'd like to hand this to our Executive Director, and then you can deliberate later how you would like to work this. This is a letter she's asking for support, or a letter of support from the Kentucky Human Rights Commission to designate the her Church of Our Savior for the National Register of Historic Places. And so to speak, we have the Honorable Covington Human Rights Commissioner, Mr. Mike Steinman. Then we have the Honorable Vice Mayor of the City of Covington, Mr. Ron Washington. And then we have Mr. Chris Hartman for the Kentucky Fairness. You'd like to go first, Mr. Steinman?
Sure. I don't know if I'm honorable or even semi-honorable, but thank you. And for bringing this down, I guess, up to Covington. Anyway, I need a map here. I have been pushing on the local Human Rights Commission. What you're going to say immediately is a stretch, a pipe dream, unrealistic. And let me say that trying to help Commissioner Washington address the commission in October. Well, I believe the police chief of Covington will come in December. And really, this was all, I was guided by John Fisher, so thank you. Simple thing, gun violence, we have it. Our first real stretch of hitting a home run was let's get a ban on the assault rifles, the assault weapons. It's local, it's one jurisdiction, but maybe it sets a precedent. Well, forget that by reading the legislation. So the other one was a buyback. Voluntary, not mandatory. Don't know what would be given in return for a buyback, but that seemed to be basically confirmed or approved by the whole commission and seemed to go. But what we learned, the loophole is if the weapons are collected, they're cleaned up and resold to the public with those monies going back for police funds. Vests, whatever the police need. That should, on face value, seem, I'm not going to be eloquent about it, more than stupid. I'll take your gun. Thank you. You can have it now. So my push is, one, must these guns be resold to the public? And two, well, actually, let me answer on that. So there was a rally back in September and I got to meet Governor Beshear. And we talked for about 5 minutes. He would meet everybody who was at the rally or in line to meet him. And I told him this very thing. And he said, reminded me about his friend who was killed in Louisville at the bank. Forgot when that was, maybe it was in April. But he said what he did was personally get the gun because it was his friend and he destroyed it. But unless it's a private citizen and the governor having top power, most people cannot get that weapon to destroy it. So I'm pushing, have a buyback, trace it if the weapon was used in a crime, and if not, destroy the weapon. And an argument might be that there's not a lot of gun crime here, maybe not. There wasn't a lot of gun crime in Lewiston, Maine, or in other places, but that was small. It can happen. And what this does is for a city of what, about 42,000 people, I think, it sets a precedent. It can get all the publicity and say here, Covington, I think the fifth largest city in Kentucky, has done this, has collected guns voluntarily and destroyed them. So where the big snag is on the destruction. So again, the question is, must the police, when they collect guns in a buyback, clean them up and resell them? Stupid. Or can they? Do they have that option? And I'd say even if they can, that option should not be provided for Covington. Not talking about any of the other cities or counties in the Commonwealth, but for Covington. So we'd love to get the feedback. And why am I bringing this up here? Because you are the state commission. Might have a little more gravitas coming from you toward the legislature to lobby them on this matter. But instead of us always hearing on the news, gun crime, thoughts and prayers, we're sad, let's talk about for about 3 or 4 days. And that's it. We don't hear anything more about the Maine shooting. That action be done instead of we'll be sad about it at the next shooting. And there will be more shootings somewhere, could be here. So that is my part. And I know Commissioner Washington had adhered to the legislation and it seems pretty tight. So the key is if we can change it, appeal to logic, which really might be way out there, of the legislators, that there be buyback and destruction of weapons, voluntary buy, and just for this jurisdiction. So I'm not sure how the formalities go from here, but that's what I wanted to present. Thank you.
I'm Ron Washington. Welcome to Covington. Probably haven't been in Covington in a while, or maybe you have. A little bit about my background. I was raised here in our city, adopted. However, I was born in Harlan, Kentucky, came up adopted 3 days old. So doing our family research, my family is miners. That's where they were. They're coal miners. Went to public schools here, still support our public schools, still volunteer at our public schools. Also the first African-American police officer in the city of Florence. You know, found out that my sergeant was a Klansman, literally. Okay, so I worked under that. Retired from law enforcement after being chief deputy sheriff here in this county. And then I opened a clinic with help, known as a methadone clinic. Our clinic serviced and serves, I no longer own it, people that are desperately need for an answer to their addictions. And as a police officer, I arrested them. And after being a friend of a physician, and I started studying addiction, and I understood that it might be a choice to first take the narcotic, but after that, the mind kind of takes over themselves. And these people were being discriminated against because of their addictions. So that I began a fight to open up our clinic, and I wound up suing the city of Covington. And we won in federal court under the Americans with Disability Act. So that's a little bit about my background, and I was asked to run for office. And I'm fortunate enough to serve as city commissioner, and was the highest vote getter and became the vice mayor here in our city. But before me, people like Commissioner Mullins She came. Pam Mullins, who's also on our Human Rights Commission, was city commissioner. And I always have to, give the nod, because without people like that, I would not be able to get this position. However, switching up a little bit, good things are happening in our city. Our city used to be a place where people from Ohio would come because they could buy liquor and cigarettes at a cheaper rate. Now people want to be in our community. They want to live in our community. They want to play in our community. They want to work in our community. That's Covington. I mean, it's great. I walk down the street in the city of Covington. I don't know people. What's strange about that? You always used to know people when you walk down them. Now you don't know them, which is great. And they don't know you, and so, we are a shining star in the north part of our state. But there's a trouble. There's trouble here, just like there's trouble in the rest of the country, because as we are becoming more and more affluent, there's people that are being left behind. And we have little control over that with our city ordinances involving, what do we do to address the housing crisis in our community? Because, some of the houses that literally just a few years ago would go for 80, 90, 110,000, they have doubled in some cases. In our main Strauss Village, they have tripled. So we on the city commission are very much aware of that. But we have little on the area of, legal control over that. We don't, we're not New York City where they can control rents or anything like that. So we're aware. We rely on the federal government for a lot of money, and we rely on the state to help subsidize our housing issues. So those are the kind of big things in a broad sense that we are facing in our city. So I welcome you. I won't keep you. Thank you for coming. Please spend a lot of money in our community.
Vice Mayor, may I just embarrass you for one moment? Commissioners, you heard the Vice Mayor say a comment about leaving no one behind. And I just want to thank the Vice Mayor and the city of Covington. In the recent past, they just invested $500,000 here at Children's Home of Northern Kentucky to specifically address the needs of mental health of youth and families, especially in light of the fact that 90% of the people that we serve here use a Medicaid card to get healthcare services. And so that investment from the city, Vice Mayor, is greatly appreciated, noticed, and needed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, John.
Well, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to introduce the Honorable Covington Human Rights Commissioner Pamela Mullins. I believe it was Gandhi who said, "Be the change you want to see." The Honorable Pamela Mullins began her illustrious political career X amount of years ago. She was holding up picket signs outside the Covington Board of Education demanding that they adopt Martin Luther King Day as a holiday for Covington school children. So when they didn't do that, she ran for a school board seat and became the first Black member elected to the Covington Board of Education. Eventually, she did get Martin Luther King Day passed by the Covington Board of Education. She wasn't satisfied with that, so then she ran and won and became the first Black woman member of the Covington City Commission. And while she was a member of the Covington City Commission, she pushed and got, with the support of Joe Meyer, who was then a member of the General Assembly, to get the Kentucky Human Rights Commission to open its regional office within the city of Covington. And by the way, these coffee book tables that you have today are a gift from the Honorable Mayor Joe Meyer, who couldn't make it today, but he wanted you to know and to understand the history and the bicentennial of the city of Covington. So these are direct gifts from him. And again, he was the one who secured the money for the opening of the Covington or the Kentucky Human Rights Commission office in Covington. That was when he was a state senator, and he worked directly with Beverly Watts on that project. After the Honorable Pamela Mullins helped found the Covington branch of the Kentucky Human Rights Commission, she then became a member of the Covington Human Rights Commission. And I'm happy to say that she has had the courage to stand up for all the downtrodden people, for the gays, for the lesbians, for the poor kids who have no voice. She has been there for everyone, and she's been a guiding light and a star. And just like Vice Mayor Ron Washington said, when we look for advice and we look for guidance, we look for the Honorable Pamela Mullins. And she's a member of the Kentucky Civil Rights Hall of Fame too, by the way.
Thank you, John. Thank you all. I appreciate all the accolades and everything, but I'm really a down-to-earth homebody person who cares about my community a heck of a lot. And I'm willing to go as far as I have to go to be sure that things can get done, as John did say. We've participated in many, many different events and things that happen here in the city. And I'm sorry that I did not bring photos to share with you of some of the events. In particular, I see you have the Fairness Campaign here. The Pride Parade is something that we participate in, but we also have booths where we share our information. This particular one that we just had this year was very, very exciting for me. There was a lot of colorful, when I say colorful, people who came to participate in the celebration, as far as you may have had like one fellow, you know, like some people like put streaks in their hair, but I'm talking about just the attractiveness of the event, period. I mean, it was like it was stellar stars there to me, because people that I saw looked so fabulous the way that they were dressed. And it was just an atmosphere of fun all day that day, and taking those photos. And besides participating in the Pride Parade, also there are events here like the city of Covington, not the city of Covington, but the, trying to think, CAC. They had an event also celebrating Juneteenth. And they have been doing that for a while. So we had a booth there for Juneteenth and participated with them. But there was also a new Juneteenth celebration that happened down on the riverfront, which was different for the year too. So whenever there's a chance to go out and talk about what the Human Rights Commission does, they'll call on us, you know, to either be there, someone who can be there. And as John did say, I am called on quite a bit for advice from people who'll say, what about this? You know, what's your thoughts on it? I appreciate having that that confidence, as far as they trust that what I'm going to say to them is something that will be held in confidence. It does not have to be discussed publicly. And, you know, some of the faces I see here that I have worked with too, and right over here, you know, working, and you understand how I do get along and work to be sure that Covington is represented, particularly the African-American heritage, the culture here, low income, even environmental. And I don't know how much the Human Rights Commission will be involved in that in this day and age, but we also have to understand that when you talk about environmental justice, that's an extension to me of the human rights, because it covers everything. I mean, when you deal with housing, when you deal with racism, there's something in there that generally is going to be that goes back to the environment. It could be from a behavioral perspective as to something that an individual grew up under, and it did something within their life that caused some trauma. If it wasn't trauma, you know, like the children's home, as Ron had said, he had been adopted and he was raised in Hebron. I had been not an adopted parent, but I was one of the parents who got certified. And I actually had a young lady living in my home for a while who was 14 years old, and she had a baby, and I got certified specifically so that I would be able to have that lady in my home and be able to, you know, offer her whatever I could. But when you deal with kids, you know, it can go whichever way, and you all are aware of that. And unfortunately, this particular lady liked the streets more than she liked being at home with her baby. But today, I can say that she's an adult. Her baby is an adult. She has a child, and they're doing very well. She turned around. Her child is very much in the spiritual realm. By that, I mean she's very much into religion. And I don't, that may have been because of the upbringing, but the family that she ended up going to after she left me, I believe that may have been a pastor and his wife that took them in. But I appreciate being here today and you all listening to me run off my mouth sometimes, as I tend to do that. And welcome here to Northern Kentucky.
Okay.
Covington.
To Mr. Washington and Commissioner Diamond, let me say that guns and gun control is a major issue everywhere. I can tell you that the city of Louisville, through many organizations, have tried to fight the state statute that says that if it's seized by the police, it has to be recycled and sold. One of the things that has happened in Louisville, Jefferson County, and that is that the federal law enforcement individuals in some of those instances have seized those weapons, and if the feds seize them, they can destroy them, and the state statute doesn't affect them at all. But it's something that has to be addressed in this state. When we're going to get around to doing it, I don't know, but you can rest assured that in the commission you have an ally who's willing to advocate for whatever it is that you decide to do or want to come up with, and we'll be there with you to help. But again, yes.
Did I understand correctly? So only federal agents can destroy the weapons that are collected?
That's because there are no state funds involved at all. So federal, so the FBI, ATF, and FBI and ATF in Louisville can in fact seize guns. And in some instances, I haven't heard of any recently, but back a couple of years ago, that there was an agreement between LMPD and the FBI that the FBI would seize those weapons and in fact destroy them as a way of getting, I won't say getting around, but directly addressing what the state statute required. So.
Could funds be diverted through another channel to the local police force or to other police? Well, we'll just deal with Covington, because I guess some of the money that was made by reselling the guns is going to police protection and other services. Is there another channel for that money to be funneled?
That I don't know. I just know that, it has happened. And in Louisville, prior to really the LMPD getting into buyback, we had an activist named Louis Coleman who started buybacks in Louisville 15, 20 years ago. And because of the efforts of Louis, LMPD got involved, and when LMPD got involved, some bright, brilliant, smart state legislators decided that they need to pass a statute that prohibited them, the destruction of it if government funds were used. But that's where we are. So again, you got an ally here, and as you work through this, you share with our staff, we'll be more than willing to do whatever it is we need to do. So with that, we'll turn to Chris.
Well, great to be with you all, friends. If you don't know me, my name is Chris. I use he, him pronouns. I'm delighted to see so many friends in the room. Rick, thank you for hosting us, as always. Mary Ann, who I've been with forever in this work, been a hot minute, John CK. And great to see the Covington commissioners with whom I just spoke maybe a month and a half or so ago. I feel like I've been on the commission circuit lately. I've spent a lot of time with the Murray Human Rights Commission as well. So I'm executive director of the Fairness Campaign. Our friends at home won't be able to see the slides, but just imagine lots of rainbows as I chat. If you don't know the Fairness Campaign, really briefly, we were founded 32 years ago in Louisville to fight for LGBTQ civil rights. First in Louisville, but then a decade ago, we became statewide when the former Kentucky Fairness Alliance merged into the Fairness Campaign. So we've been working all across Kentucky to advance LGBTQ civil rights. And what I want to share very briefly is just an update of where are we? Where are we right now on queer rights in Kentucky? Because we've made some substantial advancements. However, we've taken about 15 steps backwards recently. I won't blame members of the House of Representatives who aren't there any longer necessarily, but things have gotten much more challenging.
in terms of LGBTQ civil rights. And just briefly about the Fairness Campaign. Of course, we believe in fairness for all y'all, but we've always believed deeply in the intersections of racism, classism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia. And from our founding in 1991, we have done all of our work for LGBTQ civil rights across Kentucky with a racial justice lens, and have were early adopters of the Black Lives Matter movement. And we look back to the origins of the modern American civil rights movement for LGBTQ rights, is that it was begun by Black and Brown LGBTQ leaders, Black trans women, Latinx queer folks who threw those first bricks and bottles at police officers in 1969 at the Stonewall Inn and launched those 3 nights of rioting, which are really the reason we have any of the LGBTQ civil rights progress that we have today. And so, we look at the intersections of our movement and look at the way that we've had to continue to protest police violence against marginalized communities, particularly against Black Americans who we know are disproportionately harmed and murdered at the hands of so many police officers. And of course, we believe in trans rights, because that is the issue du jour of every legislator in America right now. Seems like trans issues are the most important and most pressing issue amongst them, even though this is one of our smallest and most vulnerable population. So really quickly, when I started at Fairness 15 years ago, only those dark blue states were where you could get married if you were LGBTQ in America. Think about how dramatic that change is, that now, of course, we've got marriage all across the United States. Thanks to the Supreme Court, that's the day they heard oral arguments in Obergefell v. Hodges. Of course, the last time I was here at Children's Home of Northern Kentucky was to hear Jim Obergefell, an Ohio resident, Cincinnati native, speak to the group here at Children's Home of Northern Kentucky. Of course, there were 6 Kentucky families in that landmark lawsuit too. I don't want to forget that. And that's because we're in the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals with Ohio. It was Kentucky, Ohio, Tennessee, and Michigan that went up to the Supreme Court and won the right to marry all across the United States. If we had left this to the voters, we still wouldn't have LGBTQ marriage in Kentucky and most of the Deep South, and probably a few states scattered here and there. So we got marriage everywhere. You can be married in the morning, but you can still be kicked out of a restaurant in the afternoon if someone thinks that you're LGBTQ plus. And this is what so many folks still don't understand. But of course, you all as the commission were one of our keystone partners when we really started doing this work across the state about 12 years ago. We formed the Fairness Coalition, which has traditionally included the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights, the ACLU of Kentucky. Lexington Fairness was a founder at that time. They no longer are in operation. And then the Kentucky Fairness Alliance, which I mentioned merged into us. Now, of course, things have changed recently. In the past 3 years, the Bostock ruling made it clear that discrimination protections in the workplace are covered all across the United States for LGBTQ folks. And we've got a quote there from Justice Gorsuch. Just a reminder, that was a 6-3 opinion, more substantial than the marriage opinion, which was 5-4. This one was 6-3 to say sex discrimination in employment law, which already exists, includes LGBTQ folks. So Justice Gorsuch affirmed it. President Biden immediately implemented it in all federal agencies and programs across the United States. And that means that no matter where you live in the US, if you are discriminated against in the job, in the workplace, on your job, because you're LGBTQ plus, you can go to the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights or your local Human Rights Commission or the EEOC and file your discrimination complaint. It's not necessarily automatic for housing protections. By extension, the Supreme Court's definition of sex should include LGBTQ folks in housing discrimination protections as well. But that's probably still going to take a journey through the courts at some point to affirm that. Now, on this map, you'll see the dark green states have a statewide fairness law. They have already updated the state law to say employment, housing, public accommodations protections include LGBTQ folks. Kentucky has not done that. However, you see that we're shaded in a little differently there. We've got the vertical lines on the state, and that is because you all, the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights, adopted the Supreme Court's interpretation of sex discrimination in employment to apply to housing. And you did that 2 years ago. And that was huge. It didn't make news, maybe kind of intentionally, but we worked closely with the commission to make certain that you all adopted that interpretation. And so anybody in Kentucky who's LGBTQ and experiences housing discrimination can file their complaint with you all. And that is substantial progress. What we don't have in the state, what's still missing in most of the United States, the majority of US states, are public accommodations protections. And usually I have to explain what that is to other groups, but you all are acutely aware that public accommodations are bloody everything, right? Bars, restaurants, public parks, transportation, you name it, it's a public accommodation. And in all the states that are not shaded in there, you can still be denied service, be kicked out of the establishment if someone thinks you are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. And so again, the majority of the United States population still lives in a place where they can experience legal discrimination if they're LGBTQ+. Now, there are local places in Kentucky where that's not true. Of course, Covington here 20 years ago, John talking, your commissioner here who was on the commission helped make this happen. Covington's had their fairness ordinance locally to protect LGBTQ folks from discrimination for 20 years. Louisville and Lexington are getting ready to hit their 25th anniversary next year, the first communities to do it. And now we've got 21 other places across the state. And you see a disproportionate number of them right up here in the area in northern Kentucky. And that's because the city of Covington issued a challenge to its neighbors about 5 years ago to say, look, we've had our ordinance at that time for 15 years. When are you all going to protect your LGBTQ folks from discrimination? Dayton was the first additional northern Kentucky city to pick up that mantle and say, we're going to be the next ones to do it. And then there was a domino effect. And you see, we've got 10 cities now up here in northern Kentucky that have protected folks from discrimination. We've only lost a few fairness ordinance votes. One of them, notably though, up here in Boone County, right next door. Of course, the city of Union voted against a fairness ordinance very recently. The city of Murray adopted a fairness ordinance, but didn't give it any enforcement powers. So I said, you did the hard part. You put sexual orientation and gender identity in your law, but then you didn't give them anything to do with it, to do about it. So we've been trying to work with the commission there, trying to work with the city council. It's difficult. 24 places, it only covers about 30% of the state's population. So we're talking about 70% of Kentuckians still today kicked out of a restaurant, potentially, denied service at any business just for being LGBTQ+, and there's nothing at all that they can do about it. We've got 3 cities that have banned the deadly practice of conversion therapy, which I think you all are aware what that is, trying to convince usually a young queer person that they can somehow change who they are, not be lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. We know not only it doesn't work, but that it causes irreparable harm, a higher incidence of depression, self-harm, unfortunately suicide. And we've seen that play out too often in our state. Okay. Covington, notably, the first city in the state to do it. So Covington was first, followed by Louisville, and then Lexington. This has been just in the past few years. But, we're still absent a statewide fairness law. We're still absent a statewide ban on conversion therapy. More than 20 states have banned conversion therapy. So again, 31% of the states protected from discrimination if they're LGBTQ. This is where we are situated with our neighbors. And those numbers are so small, you all can't see them. But we're very similar to our neighbors to the north. Indiana and Ohio also protect about 30% of their state's population with local fairness ordinances. The dark green states, again, have passed a statewide fairness law. West Virginia's got a little under 20% of their population protected. You'll see Tennessee and Arkansas look different. And that is because in those states, the state legislatures have banned local fairness ordinances. And that is a threat that we have faced many times over here in Kentucky. With one simple law, they could eradicate all of the local LGBTQ plus protections that exist across the Commonwealth. We have beaten that bill each time it has come, but we are constantly in danger of becoming a Tennessee or an Arkansas, where Nashville and Chattanooga once upon a time had fairness ordinances and now no longer. Overall, we've got a low policy tally for LGBTQ plus rights. We've got about 150,000 known queer folks living in the state from ages 13 to adult. That's only about 3.5% of the population, but it includes more than 80,000 workers in our state. And more than a quarter of queer families are raising kids. So we're really talking, when we're talking about LGBTQ rights, we're talking about family issues and family rights. This is just so you can see where we are with our peers. I can't believe we haven't turned red yet, but this gives you an indication of how bad the Deep South is for LGBTQ rights. And again, we see the intersections, the interplay of racism and anti-LGBTQ sentiment. It's no surprise that the parts of our country that have historically been the worst in terms of accepting and uplifting our Black communities are also the worst at accepting and uplifting our LGBTQ plus communities. And now very briefly, I will touch on, just so you know, the state of affairs in our legislature. And I mean, you couldn't miss the constant talk about particularly trans rights in Kentucky this year, but it's happening all across the nation. It's a well-coordinated, well-funded, conservative think tank strategy that they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars on to carbon copy these anti-LGBTQ attacks because they lost their key political wedge issue when they lost marriage. When the Supreme Court made LGBTQ marriage the law of the land, they had to look for something else. And unfortunately, their polling landed on trans rights because trans folks are such a small percentage of the population that not enough people have a trans family member whom they love, a trans coworker that they're close with, or a friend. And so this is what we see. In the past 14 years that I lobbied the legislature here in Kentucky, I fought 1 or 2 anti-LGBTQ laws a year. This year we had a dozen of them. Texas alone had more than 150 anti-LGBTQ laws. There have been more than 800 anti-LGBTQ laws introduced in state legislatures across the nation this year. That is like 100 times the number of bills we used to have to fight just last year, the year before, etc. And so, of course, folks are aware that we passed Senate Bill 150 in Kentucky this year. It does all of this stuff, which is so harmful to trans kids, and it's going to have disastrous effects. But also, of course, it affects the classroom. It's talking about censorship. And of course, we saw this coming too with the critical race theory bills. And a lot of times the critical race theory bills had the LGBTQ censorship inside them anyway. This has been considered one of, if not the worst, anti-trans bill in the nation to pass this year because of everything they put in it. Next year, I do expect a couple of these bills to come back. The drag bill that didn't pass this year. Yeah, Rick.
Chris, I just want to jump in there on that last slide where you're talking about doctors. We have approximately 30 clinicians on staff here. The same situation, independently licensed therapists, if they address sexual orientation or gender identity with a client, would have lost their state license. And this is at the same time where Kentucky just called an emergency meeting last week about the fact that we don't have enough therapists to provide mental health services. And so that Senate bill would have effectively meant that if one of our therapists was talking to a child, a kid, an adolescent about sexual orientation, gender identity without parental permission in writing, they would have lost their license. Imagine the kids that we take care of who do not have great relations with their parents. That effectively meant that there's nobody they could talk to clinician wise, without the threat of that clinician losing the license with that bill. Shocking. And, the crisis has forced Kentucky families to become refugees from their own state. They are fleeing to find gender affirming care for their kids. Up here, of course, they're going across the river. Half the state is going across the river, and Tennessee and Georgia. I mean, this is the crisis. You talk to any gender affirming physician in Cincinnati and they're like, I can't keep up with this. It's an unsustainable situation that the legislature is creating. Only 2,000 trans kids estimated in the entire Commonwealth of Kentucky. The whole state, we could fit them in this building. So anyway, you know that the ACLU has sued. It's not going well in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. Our case is tied up with the Tennessee case. We had a stay for about a month. It was taken away. So things are not going well. If you know any families with trans kids who need to seek care outside of the state, they can get, it's very small, but they can get an emergency $500 grant with virtually no questions asked from our partners at the Campaign for Southern Equality. If you need this information, of course, you can reach out to me. And just so you see the two Americas that we're creating super quickly, these are all the states that have banned gender affirming care. And I mean, Ohio is probably following closely behind in the next 1 or 2 years. Kids in the South who are landlocked and have to travel through multiple states to try to get the care that they need, it's just untenable. These are the states that have banned trans girls from playing on girls' sports teams. If you recall, in Kentucky, when we passed that bill, there was only one girl that we knew who was playing sport, a 12-year-old trans girl who started her school's field hockey team because they didn't have enough players. She recruited all of her friends, and then the state legislature passed this law that said she couldn't play with her friends her 8th grade year. And then unfortunately, we're on the cutting edge of banning trans kids from using bathrooms and facilities that match their gender identity. They tried it almost a decade ago in Kentucky. We killed it, but it came back this year. It didn't even get debated as part of the Senate Bill 150 debate because they just rolled everything up in there the last day of the legislative session. And so you see only a few states, including Kentucky, have banned trans kids from using the bathroom. And this is where we are on the censorship bills. Now, the green states actually have laws that say you have to teach about LGBTQ history in the classroom. But all of the other states, the red and orange there, or orange and lighter orange, those are states that have in some form or fashion censored discussion of LGBTQ plus topics in the classroom. So that's kind of where we are. Of course, we have a big rally every year. The Kentucky Commission on Human Rights has often participated in our rally in Frankfurt. It's February 21st of next year. I'm going to just throw my contact information up here, just so you have it. Sorry, a lot of that, the rest of that is for corporate training. But just know that we're going to continue to face these challenges here in Kentucky. They're going to pass the anti-drag bill pretty quickly, I would imagine, next year, which is a clear free speech infringement. They're going to, quote, fix Senate Bill 150. They used a grammatically incorrect conjunction in the law, creating an and/or situation, but they're going to change that. Right now, it is schools can choose to not teach sex ed under 6th grade or not teach about LGBTQ issues. They meant to say and, so they're going to say and when the legislature comes back. And there are all sorts of other ways that they may come up with to try to attack the LGBTQ rights that do exist in the Commonwealth. And we'll be leaning, as we always have, on the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights to hopefully make your all's voice heard institutionally to try to convince the legislature to back down from further infringing upon these civil rights. I'm happy to field any questions. I'm grateful for the time to chat with you yet again, and just thank you for your important work for the Commonwealth.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for Chris? Anyone?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. So we now move on to section reports. First up is the executive director.
Yes, good morning. I think it's still morning. Good morning.
Yeah.
Wanted to give you all first, an update on our facilities situation. We are still at the Hayburn. We talked with, Ryan Hoover from Finance on Tuesday of this week. And we are looking at getting an agreement, a lease agreement to move to the temporary site on Whittington Parkway by December the 1st. He is working now to get us a lease that we can sign for the temporary spot on Whittington Parkway. As I mentioned before, there will be some issue as far as we will be paying lease for both the Hayburn building and the temporary site for a period of time. We're hoping that it'll only be for 1 month, but it may roll over to a second month, depending on how much time it takes us to get all of our furnishings and everything out. Understanding that we only have one elevator, no freight elevator. So we're going to be working with the moving company to make sure that we are able to get everything moved, and things that need to be sent to surplus, that those things are sent to surplus in time. Once we have the agreement for the temporary space, we will start moving and have staff go to the temporary space and begin working at the temporary space while we work to clean out all of Hayburn. Since our last commission meeting, we've been working with EEOC and HUD. With EEOC, I think I mentioned before that we met our contract. The contract submission has been approved and received by our finance, by Brandon, our finance people. We are working right now with HUD. We have to do training plans for HUD. And I know that in the past you've heard of monies that we've received for training. What happens is HUD gives us a 1044 that says, okay, you're going to get training, this amount of money for training for this period of time based on whatever training plan that you have. And then they allow us during that time period to pull down some of the money. I think it's 90%. But then we have to verify everything that we actually said that we were going to do. So we have actually been working the last couple of weeks, all staff has, to pull out and dig out verification of any training that we've received, not for fiscal year 23, but for fiscal year 22. So we have been providing information to HUD for fiscal year 22, which was extended for from October 2021 through September 2023. And in addition, we had a fiscal year 23 amount of funds that we're also having to verify everything that happened during that time period. So we've been working with them. Yesterday, before I left, I was told that both of them would be approved. Everything that we paid, they will approve. They just needed a couple of more things. And so we provided those before we left yesterday.
And Cynthia, that's for staff training, internal training versus external.
It could be either. Yes, it could be either, and it could be for staff or commissioners.
Okay.
Yes. One of the things that occurred in one of them was, I don't know if you all recall the Urban League fair housing training that they had. We had to find verification about who participated in that and all the things that went on for that. So again, they have all that information. I'm not going to take up a lot of time. I do have, as reported, we had 13 cases that were submitted for review and approval. 8 were employment cases, 3 were public accommodations cases, and 2 were housing cases. Chair Burst, we have submitted one of the cases is a conciliation that needs your signature on the document, and I provided that information for you. We also, Chair Burst, you will see, and I believe that it needs to be voted on. You all in September agreed to a resolution for Commissioner Blythe And it was not presented at the last commission meeting, so I brought it today for signature and also for vote and we will make sure that his family receives that resolution.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the resolution for Commissioner Henry Black? Been moved and second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution is approved. Anything else on your report that needs action?
No, sir, only the conciliation. It doesn't need action of the board, just your signature.
Question for the. There are one or two who are incredibly hardworking and honorable members of the commission who have not yet had their terms re-upped by the governor.
Yeah. What has happened in the past and what we've been informed, whatever your term, your expiration, you remain on the board until you're reappointed, resigned, or replaced. So we will get notification. We should get something after the election. We have not requested it. They normally just come about, usually about right after the inauguration, we usually get notification of what the new terms are.
And that's it. I'm happy. Got 5 more people?
Okay. No other questions for Cynthia. Let's move to the finance report, Brandon.
Good afternoon. Now you have my report before you. I'll clarify one thing. It says pending deposit. Just within minutes after sending this, of course, I got the deposit transmittal notification. So we have deposited those EEOC funds. They are not represented in the federal fund cash balances at the bottom of the narrative. I'll take any questions at this time.
Any questions for Brandon on finance report?
One question.
Sure.
The executive director mentioned that we're going to be paying 2 rents for a month or so.
1 month.
Well,
Or maybe
1
2.
month.
Yeah.
maybe, yeah.
Is the state aware of that? I know that often the right hand doesn't talk to the left.
Yes, finance cabinet is aware of that.
Also,
They are absolutely aware. Yeah,
Okay.
they're advising us on that.
do we know how long we plan to be in temporary space? I know it's not exactly you, but
We don't
okay, that's
have,
a fair.
so it depends. So we're doing a little bit of build out. And we have not received an estimate or any estimated even time of
But the
completion.
finance committee is aware already
All
that
aware.
there is this.
Yep.
Okay.
We have to go through the finance
Yes.
committee. So we're working hand in hand with them.
you.
Initially,
Yeah.
we did.
They're telling us, right? We
Yes,
don't-
we did they sent us a plan. We told them what we needed with the people that we needed to house. They did a plan and we had to approve that plan. Part of that plan required a build out for the permanent location. That build out will be entered into the lease for a period of time for the lease, 5-year period, I think, for the lease. So all that has to go through finance before we can do anything. So we're working hand in hand with them.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay, any other questions for Brandon leading the finance?
Curiosity question, will the state give us help with the rental fees, or will either facility cut the fees for us?
No.
What? Okay, just thought I'd ask.
No, there has been some question about what rights we have or what happens with the Hayburn, because we haven't had heat all,
Right.
we didn't have heat, we didn't have air all summer. We've only had 1 elevator. We have stuff in the basement. We don't have a freight elevator. It's going to cost us a lot more for them to be moving our stuff for a longer period of time because there's only 1 elevator, but hasn't been any serious conversation about the possibility. What does that mean with the Hayburn? You know, we don't know. It's on us, basically. All the expenses on us.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, go to mediation, Simon.
We file a claim.
Well, we need to have a discussion with real properties in terms of how it's being handled, and at some point we will have that discussion.
And
Yes.
again, hello, everyone, and Commissioner Worth, thank you for the program so far and for having us. You have my report before you. It's the two cases that have settled since the last commissioner meeting. One was a public accommodations case. It was a disability issue, or I'm sorry, yes, so 3 have settled since the last commissioner meeting. A public accommodations case involving a disability that settled for $3,000, and an employment case that settled. It was based on discrimination based on race. The agreement was a waiver of rehire for the employee to voluntarily leave with a $1,500 settlement. And then lastly, an employment case based on sexual harassment discrimination that settled just this week for $100,000. And other than benefits to the complainant, given the large settlement amount, the employer has had to reinforce some changes in ensuring, for instance, that the employees know who the EEO coordinator is, retraining their employees on how to report incidents, and most importantly, making sure the people that the higher ups know how to handle complaints like that. The issue did lead to an employee being on leave, and as a result of the mediation, one of the people at the higher up who did mishandle the situation will be terminated.
Now, who
Good
is the employer?
I can't
You
discuss
can't say.
that.
Okay.
That's what it rhymes with.
Can you tell us if it was public or private?
Public or private?
Mm-hmm.
Private. Yeah.
It's a significant settlement, and it sounds like it was a lot of work.
It was a hectic day, but overall a good day.
Can't hear you down here.
I'm sorry, I said it was a hectic day, but overall good outcome. For
Let me
both
just say,
parties.
as someone who has worked very hard with the executive director over the last few years to straighten out the way that we address cases. I've heard more reports in my time on the commission of cases that were overlapped or dates that were missed. Before you got here, Cole, not blaming you. Then I have victories. So thank you for your work and well done.
Thank you. And that's all.
Hey, to enforcement, Cedric.
Yes, we are still, good morning, everyone, or afternoon. We are still rocking and rolling in the enforcement. One of the things I want to highlight is the conciliation that Chair Burris is looking at. That was with an investigator who's only been 6 months working with legal to get a sum for that complaint and other measures as well regarding that conciliation. So that's something I wanted to highlight. We're getting cases done. There's progress being made on the older cases, but I do want to stress, I would not approve a case to be closed if it's not thoroughly investigated, no matter the age of that case, whether it's 800 days or 100 days. So that is a hit I'll take, but I would not send it to be closed unless it is thoroughly investigated. Outside of that, training, as the chair talked about, not the chair, the director talked about, very important. One of the reasons why you only see 2 housing cases is because I participated in a training on November 2nd and October 31st regarding the way we do the determinations that are mailed out by HUD, that are mailed out to the respondent and the complainant. Those have been revamped. So cases that were submitted for closure were pulled so we can update and redo the determination letters. Yeah, that number will be in January, but those cases will be closed and sent out prior to January, but you'll see that in the January, those numbers. But outside of that, we're making progress and we're moving. Any questions at this time?
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move to education hours.
Good afternoon. I'm gonna rock and roll right along with Cedric. I don't have anything to add to my report unless you do have questions. except that those events that were noted, and scheduled for November have already been completed, so. They were all to take place early in the month and they're done. So that's that. Unless you have questions.
Any questions? Okay, let's, legal unit, code.
Good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Colt Sells. Commissioner Worth, thanks for hosting us here today. No significant changes from the legal unit report from last month. You'll notice that we have charged one case since we last talked, but we still look forward to getting that number up as we work with Cedric and enforcement. And again, the legal unit continues to look for private litigants who are working through KCRA claims, so to determine whether or not and how much assistance that we can lend them. We are getting a new intern from the University of Louisville. As for the winter, the Greenbaum Public Service Project will give us one student for 30 hours. And we will make sure that we give them a good 30 hours of work. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to take.
What does the winter consist of?
Well, I think just after the fall break, after semester is concluded, yeah.
Any questions for Cole? In your report, you referenced the comments or changes that we received back on the proposed regulatory changes. What are those? I guess, I guess we need to know more specifics around what is being requested back, what changes are there after having put together the original changes.
In large part, they have to deal with the posters that we've incorporated by reference. An old address, for example, there have been questions as to whether or not the materials are suitable for those who have low eyesight, some vision capability issues there. That's the bulk of it is the posters, and we put that on pause. We've deferred our review with them until we have an address to update the posters, and a couple of minor things, citation issues that they wanted on the poster that we didn't previously have. Minor things, but again, we've just been in a holding pattern just due to the lack of knowing about what's going on with our facility.
But all of them are minor.
Pardon?
All of the comments are in fact minor.
Nothing substantive, no. Just updating addresses and minor things like that.
Any other questions for Cole?
Thanks.
Okay, I don't think we have any committee reports, any new business. I guess I guess two things. One, the calendar year 2024 work plan that you shared with us. I don't know if other commissioners have read it. As I've gone through that, what I come to the conclusion, I see no metrics and I don't see anything that indicates how we measure success or what success is.
Okay.
And I think it's important for us to be in a position to know what are the standards we're measuring ourselves to, so that we can do an assessment at the end of the year, as opposed to, the things that you propose to do are laudatory and are much needed. But how do we measure success and measure what we do in terms of what's taking place and how that is done? And so I want to make certain that we do that. Related not to that, but just in terms of going back to Sana's report on the mediation, with the way we have now reorganized things, I'm wondering what is the commission's role in terms of going forward, because we get no substance, no detail or anything. And basically, other than today approving one item, it's like we're a perfunctory organization with no real work to do. And I think I got questions about where we are now. And really, if what we've been doing is the way it is supposed to, there's really no role for the commission.
I can probably add something to that. I think one of the largest functions of the commission is to approve the recommended order of administrative hearing officers and make those final orders. Those just haven't gotten to you. We either settled the case or just the lack of caused cases that go through the administrative hearings process.
But then, Colt, that would mean we only need to have a meeting when it's one of those to approve.
Well, that's just one, that's just the legal unit's
I'm just
perspective.
telling you,
Sure.
I guess I'm really concerned about where we are now as a commission, what are we looking at and what are we approving, so. Which is probably worthy of a conversation, a much more detailed discussion around that.
I think that the fact that so much has changed under your leadership is exactly why we need the commission. I don't think that voices like Rick's are heard enough from the Commonwealth. I don't think voices like Doris's are heard enough from the Commonwealth. I think the fact that we have this incredibly diverse and intuitive commission, hearing these reports, giving feedback on what they're doing, I think is incredibly important. I think it's far from, these meetings are far from symbolic. For my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'm gonna push back on that because I'm trying to sit here and figure out what it is that we did do. Okay, yeah, I think it's good to hear from the community, and I'm glad we came to Northern Kentucky and glad we heard from people here. But in terms of actual functioning for the commission, I don't know what are we doing?
Well, I know, based on the report I heard, and he's been in Murray. Now I'm gonna go back to Murray and meet with the people from the LGBTQ community and help with the enforcement issues that they're having. And make some connections there in my community based on that report that he gave, and become more involved in our area from that. That's just one area that needs attention. There are others.
I think, if I may add to what Dr. Burse is saying, it's what is the commission accountable for, and how connected are we to what we are accountable for as a commission? And are we disconnecting by procedures from something that should be meant for the commission to be accountable for and not just staff? I know that a lot has evolved since I've been on the commission, and the cases, we have made a continual progression of less and less and less and less information about the cases. And one of the reasons that I was concerned is I thought that as a commissioner, I should recuse myself from the case, that I may be at some point held accountable for being connected to it. I voted, but if I just see a last name or don't really, then I didn't know that that was something I should have recused myself from. If that's, I know we've had cases more recently in time where Dr. Burse is, because of the case, pulled back, or maybe some other person on the commission. So that was just a thought that was in my mind about, and I think that kind of connects to what Chair Burse is saying, not taking away from the advocacy that we do, support that we give. I think that's fine and good, and we should do that. But I think in terms of these matters, and then even the issue related to the facility and the challenges we've had on the facility, what is our, how can we, as the commission, speak more to this situation? I feel that Hayborn Building could be in line for some kind of a lawsuit if something continues to happen adversely to our staff. But I don't think we, this whole moving situation and having to encumber more costs because it's going to take longer, because there's not freight elevator, all of this stuff is concerning to me. So I'm just wanting to chime in with that.
As a part of the work plan in terms of things that we're doing. We talked about the need to revise the guidelines and the bylaws of the organization, in terms of where we are. It may be that as we go through that process, it ends up being an opportunity to really have a full-blown discussion about what does it mean and what are we doing? To really understand and define what is the role of the commission. Because right now, I think there's some real questions. And we're not gonna solve it today, but I raise that so that we know that that's something that we ought to be putting on the agenda going forward, so we're able to deal with that. Anyone add in?
I do have something to say. I think that what we've been doing from what I've been seeing, I know that I haven't talked a lot because it seems like you guys have it under control. Honestly, what you guys do is a lot, and we do appreciate everything that you guys do. And I always come out with the same thing. What more could we do? You guys have it down, you guys have it patched, aside from other things like the chair said that we have to approve of. Other than that, you guys do a really, really great job, and I really do appreciate that. But we always come here and we listen to what you guys have done. And I don't listen to what we have done as commissioners. I haven't heard what you have done in your city, where you have gone, what you got approved, who you talked to, providing them with more material to get more things done. Maybe you guys have, or we have a connection that they overlook or they don't have that could help them alleviate some of the stress that they are going through. So when it comes to organizing or setting a date to actually sit down and see and, we distribute our work, we include ourselves in it. When we come to these meetings, hey, last week we got this from the city. Next week, our the people that are working with the pride, they're struggling to this. Who could go? Who can see? And just include ourselves in that. But it comes again to set a date. Let's set a date where we can actually sit down and be organized and see what we can actually do, instead of just coming to these meetings and listening to the great work that they're doing and not attribute nothing to what is being done. And to me, that's one of the things that I really do think that we need to push for January or February, whenever we meet up again. Hopefully we continue with the group that we have, but that doesn't mean that everything has to stay the same. We already made a couple of changes this year where you guys have more liberty to, move faster. So we, as a commission, also need to catch up to them and see what they're doing and give them the help that they need, and not just be, commissioners meeting, let's go, and, we're adding more work to them. They have to make this whole booklet. They have to give us information that they already have, instead of, we need to give them also a booklet, in my opinion, to see what we have and what we can provide for them. Because if we're in this position, it's because we have a certain connection or we have a certain gift that we can provide some help for them. And if we don't see it like that, then I think we're not in the right position
I also think
to be of help.
Echo what Commissioner Smith said. We recently made changes to our oversight in order to increase speed and efficiency. I don't know if we found the perfect balance of efficiency and oversight yet. For issues like withdrawing from cases, for issues like that. I don't know if we have found that perfect balance yet between efficiency and proper administration and oversight.
Yes.
When I first joined the commission, it was really interesting. Some of folks here will remember, we used to get incredible pages and pages of detail. And it was almost like commissioners were reinvestigating or micromanaging the staff decisions. And that always surprised me because, you've got the staff is answerable to the executive director, is answerable to the board and the commission. Use a proper chain of authority, and it always felt like overstep to me.
then we went to sort of the, what I call Reader's Digest condensed version. I was comfortable with that. We could ask questions of staff. We could get a sense of whether or not we might ask that there be a little additional work on a case. At this point, we are completely removed from the process. I'm not comfortable entirely with that, given the duties of someone who is actually a commissioner. And if there's an amen corner here behind Commissioner Anita, I'll stand with her. Because I think she made some excellent points. I would like to I would like to revisit the role of the commissioners and the duties of the commissioners and find more meaningful ways to serve on this commission. Because as it currently stands, it feels almost like I want to say figurehead, but it feels somewhat like a lack of substance. So.
Any others?
I think coming back to that food, I think that I can't say necessarily that we can't go back to, I did like the part where we would understand about the cases. That was very interesting. I was a part of that for a little bit. I don't know, I wasn't there when you guys had a whole book, right? But that was interesting. But there were problems with them, from what I know. You guys had a lot of problems with case backlogs and days and people wouldn't be heard and listened to. And so that was a problem. And the solution that you guys had once finding was this, for you guys to bypass it and get it done. So I don't think, my personal opinion, that we should go back on that, but we do need to set up a way for us to be more involved. And we do need to change what we are as commissioners, but it needs to get done. I'm sorry, I'm gonna go back to that. We can't just postpone it. We need to find a date to find and be of some substance.
If I could touch on the question that was presented to me, a mediated agreement, and I mean, by definition, it's a confidential agreement, and the respondents, for instance, would of course not enter into an agreement knowing that the terms of that agreement would be shared, and specifically in a public setting like this, or we are broadcasting this meeting. So the terms of the agreement can't even be shared among staff. So mediated agreements are always going to stay confidential. I know that not all mediators at commission do this, but a lot of times parties will enter into their own agreement that even I am not privy to, but so far I have made sure to be privy to every single agreement and to be a part of reviewing that agreement and to make sure that it is fair. But I know that in some other commissions, for instance, that parties may even enter into their own agreement and the commission's not even involved. But so far we haven't.
I'm gonna push back on that with both feet. And that is, again, it's about roles and function and responsibility. If you read the statute says the commission. Read all the way through the statute, it says commission. It doesn't say the staff, it says the commission. And the commission is the commissioners. So if there is in fact a settlement in terms of then the commission needs to know what those things are. And if it's confident, and we can't discuss in a public session, we can always go into executive session for the commission to in fact know what it is. And I think, as I say, we're not going to solve it today, but I think we may need to hit the pause button and have a longer conversation around what that means. I had the same conversation with the previous executive director in terms of, and we went back and forth because when I read the statute and it says the commission, I'm expecting, and it has a definition of commission, that commission needs to act. Not that the staff needs to act. Staff works for the commission and the commissioner is responsible for it. But anyway, we'll work on setting up something either January or February for a discuss, a more detailed discussion where we can go into more detail about that in terms of where it is. But I just say I am uneasy with being, sort of a non-actor rubber stamps in terms of what's going on, and we need to make certain that we're, and again, that fits in with, I think, when I looked at the work plan, things that you plan on working on, that we need to do. So, is there any other new business or any announcement?
I wanted to raise this, on the clippings. There was an issue related to the Commission on Race and Access dealing with the constitutional amendment and related to the removal of slavery from the Constitution's 13th Amendment as a punishment for a crime, I think. And to me, that is something to keep our finger on the pulse of how that's working. And I don't know if there's any engagement.
Cynthia attended a meeting.
Yes, I attended, and Senator Neal actually is spearheading this. And so it will be ongoing. There hasn't been a lot of traction in the past. You all know that you all have approved resolutions in the past. We've had 2 that were approved in the past, recommending that it be removed, and with no real success. But they are continuing to go toward that effort, and hopefully with this next session that will happen.
And more specifically, we are continuing to support it.
Yeah.
I mean, no matter how many swings, I mean, the Crown Act is a bunch of things that took us years and years of swing to make any impact whatsoever. You know, keep swinging.
It's a commission meeting, so visitors are not allowed. There's a period at the beginning of the meeting where that was allowable. It relates to that the committee, I think I looked at the television clips of it. At least there were more, or at least the newspaper, 1 or 2 people in there who were looking at it and asked for draft language to be brought back to the court. And then there is a group out of Lexington that I read. I don't know whether it's high school students or whatever.
They were from a church.
Engaged and involved in terms of doing legislation.
They were from a church group, a youth group from a church, and that they're also working on there. They gave testimony as well during that time period.
Okay.
On other new business, since October 7th, when there was a massive attack on Jewish citizens and Arab citizens in Israel, resulting in 1,200 deaths and numerous sexual assaults and slaughter of babies, etc. We've seen nationally and in Kentucky an incredible explosion of anti-Semitic incidents. With students being intimidated, with posters being posted calling for genocide of Jews at University of Kentucky, University of Louisville, Western Kentucky University, Eastern Kentucky University, and Northern Kentucky University. With violent protests on campuses, including one while the governor was speaking at UK, actively calling for the death of Jews. In addition to the numerous vandalisms that have taken place at University of Kentucky, for one, at places in Louisville, there have been at least 4 reports of physical intimidation or acts of violence that took place in the last month and a half. The University of President Louisville made one statement about a specific event that took place on campus where violent slogans were called for. The University of Kentucky, as of yet, has made 0 statements about this, despite multiple requests from students and community leaders, including myself in Lexington, that they make a public statement. Unfortunately, it's not that they don't make public statements on national events. They make statements about the war in Ukraine, and they make statements all the time. They have made 0 statements. The first recognition in any way of what's going on at UK was someone from the Dean of Students office met with half a dozen students last night, most of who only heard about the meeting earlier that day. And it is fast becoming a crisis. You have Jewish high schoolers in Kentucky who are taking off their Jewish garb before going to school, who won't wear Jewish art at school anymore. You have students at the University of Kentucky who have taken the mezuzah, which is the Jewish ritual item, off the doors of their dorm rooms for fear of violence with fellow students. The University of Kentucky is currently considering both criminal and university charges against several students who they have on video repeatedly vandalizing Jewish signs. So anti-Semitism has been a long-standing problem in the UK. There have been numerous incidents of vandalism, of intimidation, and of violence over my tenure there. But it's an increasing problem across the Commonwealth, and I routinely speak to Jewish leaders, again, in Georgetown and Louisville, in this part of the Commonwealth. And I think it's something that our commission has a role in addressing. I think certainly first step, a resolution or public statement from our commission condemning the rise in anti-Semitism. The governor is currently working to bring together a commission or study or some sort of something to look into this. Representative Daniel Grossberg had reached out to Jewish organizations to encourage the governor in that effort. I think certainly the Human Rights Commission should also add their voice, calling on the governor to address this. I think they should also publicly call on universities to address this. But this is an increasing issue in Kentucky. I have 7 children, 7 and under. That's also a crisis in Kentucky. And they're afraid to go to Kroger with me because they heard of a violent attack that took place at Kroger in Louisville. No kid from any religion or race should be afraid to go to the grocery store with their parents in Kentucky. And I think it's something the commission needs to take a very, very serious look at. I think we need to call on and pressure the universities to speak out on this, and also add our voice to the governor to something that needs to be addressed.
You have specific recommendation?
My specific recommendation would be beginning with a resolution from the Human Rights Commission that calls on university presidents at flagship land grant institutions like the University of Kentucky, like the University of Louisville, and like Western Kentucky University. 3 of the universities have had the most serious incidents in the past month, calling on them to condemn anti-Semitism, which they have not done.
Well, the University of Louisville has.
The University of Louisville condemned a single march. They haven't spoken.
The week after, well, there's been 2 things with the president, and I'm speaking now as a member of the University of Louisville Board of Trustees, not as committee. The president of the University of Louisville, the week after, issued a statement in terms of condemnation in terms of that. Then there was a follow-up statement, more specific. So there's been at least 2 statements about it that the university president has relates to that.
So there's a student group at U of L and at Western Kentucky University that actively took part in a day of rage that was called for by Hamas, which America recognizes as a terrorist group, with the intention of intimidating Jewish students. At dozens of universities across the country, the response to that was banning that student group. University of Louisville hasn't taken that step yet. I don't think that's what we should call for specifically yet, but that is one way I'm saying to you as a member of the U of L board rather than as a commissioner, that U of L could show their commitment to Jewish students. I speak with a rabbi at U of L all the time. Jewish student events are happening off campus because they're afraid to have them at the interfaith building. I grew up in Louisville. I have a deep love for Louisville in my heart. That is not something that should be taking place. As for Western Kentucky and UK, they have made 0 statements on this. They've made 0 statements while there's been posters that call for the death of Jews, while the Jewish posters and signs have been vandalized, while Jewish students have been intimidated. That's certainly something that I think we need to have a voice in and demand that the administration at UK and WKU call that out, and that they have 0 tolerance for it. And secondly, that we call on the governor to
put forth a committee or commission to address this as has been discussed over the past few months, even before the October 7th meeting. I'm happy to work with the executive director on language for a resolution that could be emailed to the board to take a look at.
Is it possible that we might just jointly craft that language and take that action today?
Certainly, I mean, there's certainly other states' resolutions we can work off of.
Yeah, I think it's gonna take some time to craft and do that. I think that, in terms of, Rabbi and Executive Director, anybody else want to volunteer to work on that?
I think my concern, Chair, with all respect, and it doesn't have to be today necessarily, but don't believe we meet in December. And this is, we do not meet in December.
Right.
And so if this is not something that we'd like to sit here and craft and work out today, then I'd like to see some sort of a completed very soon, within the next week.
Well,
I, as a commissioner, would like to see a resolution put forth for my vote. But beyond that, Chair, I would like to see the commission make that very public through media releases and be very clear about what we stand for.
I thought of what I heard him say was working with the executive director, we also to draft it and circulate it among the commissioners, have them sign off on it. And if people sign off on it, then it can be released immediately.
Okay.
I know we've got the holidays coming, but I just don't want to see it wander off into the.
I wanted to raise a question about, is this a broader issue in the state in any regard beyond the higher ed institutions you're mentioning? And to what scope should a resolution entail according to that? And you've cited these specific things, but wonder what is the context? What is it just to these college students and those institution leaders, or is there something beyond that?
My thoughts were, as a commission, while the resolution certainly include a condemnation of anti-Semitism, which is really the only way we can communicate with the broader public. However, as the Human Rights Commission of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, we have more of a voice in public land grant universities like UK, like WKU, like U of L. So specifically calling out administration who are government officials, that they have a responsibility here. And specifically asking the governor, who has the ultimate responsibility in the Commonwealth, to address this was specific. So it's harder for me to suggest to individual people, the Human Rights Commission is telling you this is wrong. That's what the condemnation is, I would think. So it's a much broader issue than just UK. It's a much broader issue than just U of L, just WKU. But we do have a voice as the Human Rights Commission in those institutions as they are government institutions. So, I mean, the fact that I have read multiple letters from students that were sent to UK, begging them to say something with zero response, saying we don't write public letters, which is a falsehood, or we're looking into this as the strongest responses they got back. This is a repeated issue at UK with ignoring anti-Semitism. With WKU, with the administration saying there's nothing we can do. There is something you can do. What the students are asking for is so simply to say that hate is wrong. I'm confounded why that's a difficult statement for people to make. And again, these are institutions that do make public statements about other issues and seem, for whatever reason, as if they're unwilling to make one in this situation. I personally know of several students who have started going home for the weekend because they don't feel comfortable in campus anymore. That's tremendous cost to themselves, and it's not what college is supposed to be. It's about being able to learn how to express yourself in a new society, to separate from home, to ideally grow into a fully functioning adult, although I wouldn't say that all college graduates are fully functioning adults, but ideally.
And you have this very, very serious issue going on. It's not just in the Commonwealth, it's something we're seeing nationally. Students assaulted at Harvard, students were stuck in the library in Cornell while they were yelling, Kabral Yehud, which is a call to murder Jews. There's something that I was just at a conference, the largest conference of rabbis in the world in New York, which is why my voice is still hoarse from yelling back and forth with people. It was something that they were talking about in Cyprus and England, in France and Germany, all across America and Canada and South America, that since the massacre of October 7th, there's been this tremendous flare-up of anti-Semitism. People, I mean, there was a march in New York this week where people were marching with Nazi flags. The lights place in New York.
Yeah. Well, I think where we are is that with you, with the executive director, and anyone else willing to work with the two of you to draft a resolution that the commission can adopt, circulate that among the commissioners, and we'll get the sense of the commission around that and issue a statement. And would ask the staff that once it's issued to also provide for public communication that will probably distribute for it to be broadly distributed with that. I think that's where we are.
Just another piece of new business. Executive director in previous years, under the last executive director, the Human Rights Commission would do a Hanukkah greeting to the Jewish community annually. And I'd love to work with you to find a date that works. I could drop by the new temporary office.
Okay.
Will you do that? Writing your video again?
I don't know what state the temporary office will go be in at that point.
Okay. Is there anything else?
Yeah.
Is there anything else? Sorry. Yeah, so prior to adjournment, we're going to call on first to thank Rick for hosting us here in Northern Kentucky. I served on the Center for Creative Leadership board, and we had a campus in Colorado Springs that was at the foot of the Rocky Mountains, which you could see Pikes Peak. And I used to tease them all the time. I shouldn't charge us to work for the organization. You got a view like this, and when I look at the view from here, you shouldn't get any pay at all. It's all right. It doesn't make it's beautiful. It's absolutely stunning scene for you, and we want to thank you for hosting us and having and providing all this for us. We didn't give you a lot of time to plan, but I think we've had a very fruitful meeting. So the floor is now yours.
Chair, thank you. I just wanted to say a profound thank you to Cynthia and to the team, the staff, for all of the work you did in getting the show on the road and coming up here to this neck of the woods. And I realized it was a long drive for some of the commissioners, and I appreciate that. My hometown's Paducah. So I've worn out the road between here and Paducah. But I just want to say thanks for the opportunity to host this group. This group is incredibly important, and I think it becomes all more important every day in this country with some of the stuff that Rabbi was talking about, and just the fact that we seem to be going backwards in terms of our ability as human beings to get along with each other. We spend a lot of time here talking about mental health for kids. And sometimes we as adults do not make it very easy for kids to have proper mental health because of the conduct we're engaging in. So what I hear at this meeting is a desire to be relevant in the face of these tragedies that are unfolding in our country and in our world. It's just a pleasure to be a part of this commission, and I'm grateful to be a part of it. Hope you guys know that you're always welcome to come up here anytime. And I'm really grateful that we had the folks here locally with Covington's Human Rights Commission to be able to join us. I think if I were a staff member, I think you might get tired of hearing this, but it just seems like at every meeting that I'm a member of, you hear loud and clear from the commissioners what a great sense of confidence we have in you, Cynthia, and your team. And I can't thank you enough for the work that you're undertaking. especially in light of all of these transitions with the building. And I'll end on this funny note. Somehow I think about hosting this commission on human rights made my elevator malfunction. So we have had
Oh, yeah.
repairmen here for the last 3 days. And we have never had a problem with our elevator until we invited the staff from the Hayward building to come here. And I'm thinking, oh my God. What is it? You know, I've been screaming about how horrible it is that we don't have elevators that work in the Haber unit. Only to invite you here, not to have an elevator that's working. So that's the brief thing. Here's my really end. I'm really grateful that Cynthia got to address the Kentucky Leadership Kentucky class of 2003. Funny enough, we invited both groups and they wanted to come on the same day, on the same hour. So I apologize about my tardiness, but I think it was great that Cynthia got to go up and to address an entire room of 70 people upstairs. Leaders from all over the Commonwealth about the important work. And I don't think I saw any disagreement when I mentioned to them about the fact that the work of the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights is probably more relevant at this point than it ever has been. And so I'm really grateful, Cynthia, that you got to address that group upstairs. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We really appreciate you hosting it. Okay, that's the final item on the agenda, and there's no other business to be taken, so we will adjourn without objection. Okay, there it is. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank
Thank you, Chair.
Was that the alumni meeting for leadership in Kentucky?
It was their leadership class of 2003.
Oh, 2003.
Sorry, I got that wrong. 2023. 2023.
Okay.
It's really great.
Okay.
6 weeks.